So this is, I feel like I'm sure we've all ridden in many different groups, and sometimes you jump in with a group and you're riding with them and you're just like, what in the world is going on? In a pace line, they are done very differently. And the thing is, there is no one single right way to do it.
Yeah.
It should always depend, right?
And it
Chad?
absolutely depends on the situation, because if you have like a team time trial of 4 riders, you know specifically the strengths of those riders, how they're feeling on that day, and a couple turns into it, a deeper sense of how they're feeling on that day. But that's tightly orchestrated. Whereas when you find yourself just in a break of a certain number of riders, you don't know their strengths. You don't know really hardly anything about them except what you can glean right there in the moment. So these things come together on the spot, and you have to figure out how to best make it work.
I feel like it's a lot like what you used to do, Nate, long ago when you played in a band, right?
Improvisation.
Yeah. Right.
Oh,
it's
not
like
the metal stuff, the jazz stuff.
And it's through the process of actually making music that you find out how to best jive.
I see where
like
you're
that,
going.
right? Like it's not like everybody comes in and you know exactly the tendencies and skill levels of every other musician, and that's how you guys plan it and orchestrate it.
But certain principles are always at play. You just have to wonder, do these other riders understand those principles?
Yeah, I feel like does that help? Do you think of that at all when you're in pace lines or anything else like that? Or is it,
You'll find out real quick.
You're probably way just more natural at it than all of us.
Think of what?
Like the fact of improvisation and being able to just kind of jive. You don't think of that?
No.
Man,
I think everyone should take longer, harder pulls.
Except for you.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
No, I mean,
Okay,
and how, actually, this is what I'm really thinking through my head, is how likely is the group behind us to catch us? And how hard should I pull in order to make it so that we either stay away, or if I don't care if we're going to stay away.
Yeah.
And also this is my biggest mistake when I was first racing like 10 years ago, is I would go as hard as I could each time.
Hero
and I
pulls all the
actually
time.
drop myself from a breakaway.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
Oh yeah, it happens.
A little hill comes,
Yeah.
and I just can't do it. And I made the breakaway probably go faster, but probably slower too.
Yeah.
There's also situations where in this race too, I probably could have pulled, I don't know. So if you look at my races, you can pull too hard, right? We've talked about that a lot of times.
Yeah.
But I think too, at the end of a race, pulling a little bit too hard, it just gasses everybody else too. Like you
Can.
It's
If you're
like
the strongest rider and you recognize that, it's an awesome tactic.
Yeah, you have to analyze your motives. Do you want the break to succeed together? Or do you want to, as they say always in announcing, throw the cat amongst the pigeons, kind of scatter that break away? Yeah.
Are you planning to attack that break, or do you just want to whittle it down? Because even if you can shed one rider from the break, that's one less rider you have to worry about when you do decide to do something more pivotal.
Or if the break is crucial to you guys staying away and it's early on,
you don't want to shed
you
them.
don't want to shed them, right? Because you want another set of legs.
This is at the end, and I didn't do this, but I think anyone who's ridden in a breakaway, that when you peel off, it's getting back on sometimes can be tough.
That's the true hard part.
Pete had a good tip on the video. He said, as soon as you see that last rider, and you know what that last rider is, especially in a group of 3,
You better, yeah.
in the corner of your eye, you start to accelerate right then.
Yeah.
Because what I was doing in this video is I would drop back and I would start accelerating once I was behind him. So it'd be more of an acceleration that takes more energy out.
It's a tough way to learn that lesson, but you have to get good at reintegrating. I mean, it takes place in parts. You're on the front, and then you're drifting back, and then you're reintegrating, and then you're moving through again.
Yeah.
So it's in those 4 parts, and none of those 4 parts can be weak, or you'll pay for it.
Yeah, that's really true. The other thing I think people misunderstand, and I think Pete mentioned this before, but if you feel like you have plenty of energy, but you want the break to succeed and stay together, you pull harder or pull longer, not harder, right? You don't need to do a hero pull. You just take more of that work if you feel
That
more
depends
fresh.
too. I mean, it depends on the composition of your break and how well everyone's doing. But what I would guess is you guys knew that you had to put in hard pulls, so they had to be short pulls. Really short, hard pull, move off, do it again. But that allowed you to keep what percentage of your FTP during those pulls? I'm betting pretty high.
No, I think I was doing them between 350 and 400, but they were short.
Yeah, and they had to be. I mean, could you have done 350, 400 watt pulls for a minute at a time?
Yeah.
Well, you could have. Do you think the break could have sustained that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But the
Nate's like, I'm just pulling hard. I just want other people to pull hard. It just works out.
to the point about how hard to pull too. Because at Auburn Crip, I kind of like established the breakaway. At least in the video, it looks like that. And I did a longer, harder pull that was very hard to try to create a gap. Because so that one, in that case, to Chad's point, it really matters where you are in the race. Because if you're 3 minutes ahead, Jonathan's point really matters. But if you've got a 4 bike length gap on the field, that's the time to do that really hard pull to try to break it apart.
Yeah, exactly. The other part that I think of too is, so first of all, I want to debunk the myth of every time you pull through, you lose a bike length. In an effective pace line, you don't lose a bike length at all.
Yeah, if you're doing it poorly, you might, but that's
I don't know how you would.
And I know exactly how you would. Okay. So if you are a group that's pulling through, and when a rider gets to the point where they kind of get to the front, and then at that point they cut off their effort, so to speak, and pull over, and then the next person re-accelerates to that pace,
that bike length, so to
then
speak.
That's when that would happen. You see that with like a lot of inexperienced pace lines, that sort of stuff. But really, the thing that you should think of as a pace line is more or less, you maintain a consistent speed, or perhaps is better said, you maintain a consistent effort level as a group. And that pace, when you roll through to the front, you're actually not accelerating any harder. You're having to push a little, or you're not accelerating speed. Exactly. It's more watts because you're in the wind, but you're not making the group surge, and you're not changing that pace. So if you're doing that, then you're of course not losing any bike lengths when a person switches over, because you're maintaining the same pace. But a lot of the time you'll see a person pulls off and they go, okay, now it's my turn. And then they kind of re-accelerate and push.
I like that. Same speed, more watts, but no acceleration.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, those accelerations just dismantle the whole thing.
Yeah.
They get really painful.
And once again, unless you want to really break up the group, then in that case.
That's intentional.
Yep.
Yeah.
Especially if your rider is about to get the strongest, or the person you want to dislodge is about to get back on.
Mm-hmm.
Or just took his pull.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Just took their pull, and they're going to come back.
I see what you're saying. Just about to reintegrate.
Yeah, and then you wait like 2 seconds, and then you surge. You do that like 5 times, you will destroy them.
That's cruel.
Yeah.
That is cruel.
Cruel, but effective.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, exactly. The other part that I want to cover on a pace line is some people wonder when you should rotate quickly, when you should take longer pulls. Once again, that depends on the group.
It's all something you get a feel for as you work with whatever group you're in.
Yeah, but don't be afraid of short pulls, and don't be afraid of long pulls. They have their place, and at times they will be absolutely useful for you. And the one thing I found is that a lot of the time when you're keeping a pretty quick pace and you have a larger group than just say 3 people, I really favor the shorter pulls. So it keeps people rotating through quickly.
Yeah, and you'll find too, as you move through the ranks, I mean, a Cat 3 race can be a pretty mixed bag. You can get all sorts of riders, all sorts of ability levels. As you move into Cat 1, 2, you're going to get a more consistent type of rider.
The other thing is, on this race, we were so close to the finish, like less than 5 minutes. I don't think anyone wanted to put themselves in a position where they would do a longer pull. Exactly. So if you do a long pull, then you're suddenly so we could attack you. But if we all are rotating in at this like pretty quickly, like we're pretty much just a solid rotation through, you're less vulnerable to an attack.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Totally. Yeah, I absolutely, because if you're sitting at the back and it's a long time like that, you put yourself in a spot where you might be stuck.
If you do a 30-second pull and you're coming off, I know you're tired. And if I'm in the back and I'm fresh or I'm second wheel, that's the time to attack.
Or if anybody's recognized you're one of, or if not the strongest rider in the group, and you just take a long pull, you're at your most vulnerable, and something, if they're smart, is going to happen right then.
Yeah, you're constantly analyzing your group mates based off of how they're pulling, right? That's like kind of a key thing.
You can fake it too. I mean, you could be the strongest guy and just do weak pulls and act like you're struggling to get back onto the back of it. I mean, you can.
Yeah. You can also skip pulls. You can skip pulls as well.
You can.
Yeah. This happened to me in Auburn.
Not popular, but you can.
This is going to happen. This happened to Crit, but I think it's a good takeaway because not everyone who's listening to this will see the video.
Yeah.
But in the video, it demonstrates this very well. There was the very last lap, there was a slight gap, and a guy had a teammate in the gap, and it's only like 2 or 3 bike lengths, and he's in front of me. Jeff, I don't know if you were acting or not, but he's shaking his head and like giving the gap out and stuff.
Yeah,
totally.
And I'm like, he's a really good sprinter too. So I thought he wanted me to close down the gap, then he was going to out sprint me.
Yeah.
I actually stayed on his wheel and got in front of him right before the descent, but it was tough. And that's, he did a very good tactic too of, we didn't talk about this, but if you have a teammate in the breakaway, if you cause gaps, especially if you're acting tired.
Yes.
That is so hard on people.
Yep.
You open up a 3 bike length gap, someone has to cover that. If you're riding for your teammate, it's an amazing tactic.
It's probably worth saying too, if you find yourself in a breakaway and there is somebody disrupting that rhythm and doing that sort of thing, the onus is on the breakaway to get rid of that person. You guys can get rid of that. Remember that whenever you're riding with that person isn't a necessary component of your group, and you can
try. You can try. Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah. It's not just something you have to deal with forever, I guess is what I'm saying. There is an option. And then the other part, Nate, I don't want to take you off this vein because I have another one, but it's slightly different.
In the same vein, you'll get yelled at.
Yes.
Or people will yell at you, and it doesn't matter. Like
Yeah.
it's totally okay to mess up the breakaway if you want to mess up the breakaway.
Oh, yeah.
Or
You
not
gotta
take pulls.
You
or
got to have
anything.
the thick skin if you're going to be that guy.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
And
It's true.
it's only going to benefit your racing tactically.
Yeah, exactly. So just that's I think that's the first thing that people do to you
Yep.
is they yell at you, and then you'd be like, okay, I'm sorry.
Don't engage.
Yeah,
I get roped
exactly.
into that far too often. And,
Yep.
and it takes energy out of you.
Yeah.
Takes focus out too.
I've been in pace lines before where people say that's the wrong way to pull off or the wrong way to rotate.
Oh man, I can't. Just one time. One time in particular, we were a
Trigger.
3-man group trying to get back on, and the guy kept yelling, "Pull left, pull left."
Oh yeah.
And I didn't know what that meant at the time. I didn't know what it meant. Pull
Yeah,
off
yeah.
left, line up left
Move
in an
everybody
echelon.
slightly
I
left.
wasn't sure,
Yeah.
but he just yelled it louder and louder every time. I'm like, man, I didn't understand it the first time. Sure as heck don't understand it the 18th
It's like
time just
people
because it's louder.
talking to someone in a different language and just say the words louder. Like that doesn't help.
That'll totally help. Yeah.
So I get that he was trying to be clear, just using minimal words, but
Yeah.
it wasn't sinking in. So maybe
Yeah.
rephrase it, and maybe try to be a little more descriptive.
Yeah, and I guess when you're dealing with traffic, it's common to see the rider that pulls off and is going to the back to see them sheltered from vehicles. That's common if you're dealing with that, and that's like a group ride situation, something like that, right? But when you're in a race and you have a closed road or a closed lane, there is no left or right, which is best. That's totally up to the group. Many times, what you'll try to do is the rider that's sheltered that is pulled off. It's all wind dependent. So if you have the wind coming off of your left, a lot of the time, what you'll have is the rider that's just done his pull will be coming off in the shadow of the wind, and then he'll be moving back in. Or forgive
I've
me,
seen the other
he'll
way.
be in the
I
wind.
usually
He'll
do
be
it
on
the
the
other way.
windward side,
Usually
not the
pull
leeward
into
side.
the wind, so you're still sheltering the people who are coming through.
Yeah, he'll be on the windward side instead of the leeward side, and then he'll drop back in every time. And but you can also totally flip that on its head. I mean, there's no reason why you can't do that. Just know that if you disrupt the rotating rhythm of the group, then that won't really work very well, or people will be pretty upset. But you can establish things, and then, for example, like if you feel like coming into a criterium, that sort of a thing, and you have a left-hand turn, and the finish comes pretty shortly thereafter, you can set it up so that when a person when a person pulls off, set it up so that they're kind of blocked in, or you can set it up so that that person who's just done a hard pull would have the best line to come in to that finish straight, right? So you can basically think of the line choice that you have too. There's plenty of things that you can do with the pace line to influence how it'll work out.
That's also a great tactic is if somebody's starting in the front and they're getting on the inside of the road and there's a big line of people, and you can attack them because they get kind of caught.
Yep.
They can't respond at all.
Yep.
So they're basically boxed in.
Yep. Yeah. It's a good method. And pace lines are something that you can absolutely warm your way into if this is not like a familiar thing for you, but it's something you'd like to try. Find a group of cyclists that you feel comfortable with and then work with them on it. And it can just be one other person too. You can practice it with just 2 people. You can practice it with more. But it's really cool. And when an effective pace line's happening and you're on like some sort of a group ride and you carry 30 something miles an hour through a section, you're like, this is amazing.
I was going to say,
It's kind of magical, yeah.
for new riders, if you haven't done this before, I think everyone who does their first group ride with people that are good at a pace line, you come with this big smile and everyone like you write on the internet. It was so much fun just because your experience, and it is a ton of fun to go that fast and be that easy.
It really is,
and it feels like a machine.
Oh yeah, and it's a good way to get KOMs on flat sections like that too, right?
I know.
Yeah.